Rutgers sports school year is about to begin, and wanted to have a guest on the Scarlet Faithful podcast for a long time. Happy to welcome TJ Hitchings, alum, longtime fan, and currently is a senior producer at Barstool Sports. TJ, so happy to have you. Thanks for being here.
Happy to be here, man. It's an honor. I was saying right before we started that we've actually had conversations long in the past, so it's good to talk to you on camera for once.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've always admired just kind of how you've grinded your way up in your career and actually starting Barstool Rutgers in terms of being that first kind of contact. And I think you're really the one that made it so popular and on social media. So wanted to ask you about how you got started with Barstool Rutgers and how that, just improved your experience as a Rutgers student and a fan like all of us, and kind of get connected with the athletic department during your time at Rutgers.
Yeah, so my Rutgers experience, my freshman year of college, I went to Montclair State in North Jersey. Didn't really have a good connection with the campus or the environment. It just didn't fit what I was looking for in a college experience. So I knew pretty quickly that I was going to transfer out of Montclair State after my freshman year. And my high school sent 80 kids from my graduating class to Rutgers. So a lot of the narrative around Rutgers from my high school is like, you don't just want to go like more high school. You're going to see people you know all the time. So I wasn't like super interested in going to Rutgers straight out of high school. But after having a bad experience my freshman year, I figured, I want to go to a big school. I want to go to a school with like a big community atmosphere and environment. Let's give Rutgers a shot. So I went to Rutgers starting my sophomore year in 2016. And my philosophy once I got there was like, I only have 3 years here. Let me do as much as I can, get as involved on campus as I can, and try and make this the best experience that I can. And I quickly found that Rutgers was way more of a environmental fit for what I was looking for in the college experience. Having, a big sports program and a big campus environment and, bars and restaurants on campus, like it fit what I was looking for a lot more. So I immediately got involved doing some social media stuff for the football team. I shot a couple of videos for the Targum that fall, my first fall. And then I started working for Our Vision, which does a lot of like video programming for the sports teams. And then towards the end of my sophomore year, I was presented with an opportunity to join Barstool, working in their Viceroy program for the Barstool Rutgers account, like you mentioned. I would talk to the person that was running it at the time, and he had me sell a bunch of Saturdays are for the Scarlet Knights t-shirts. And it was like, if you sell enough shirts in a certain amount of time, we'll set you up with the accounts. And I took over those accounts at the end of the 2016-17 school year. And I ran those accounts for my junior and senior full years. And that presented me with an opportunity after college to get an internship at Barstool. And that's where I am now. But yeah, that was like a huge opportunity for me. I feel like it really enhanced my college experience. I didn't do like fraternities, but I feel like it kind of had a similar community effect where I was able to like get a lot of opportunities through the Barstool brand, whether it was meeting people in the athletics program or, running events on campus. That definitely was like a huge boost to my college experience, which was something I was really, focused on. Rutgers is like the greatest place in the world to me, and it's presented me with all of the opportunities post-college that I've had, the luck of running into. And, everything at Rutgers kind of led me to where I am today. So that's why I appreciate it so much and try and spread Rutgers online as much as I can.
You're absolutely one of the more vocal people out there on social media. And obviously you work for a company that there are a lot of Big Ten alums. So it's always, Rutgers fans appreciate hearing your voice in that group. Especially, when Rutgers beats Wisconsin or in hoops or obviously Michigan, things like that. You're a big voice for Rutgers fans. So we appreciate that. But
it's a battle sometimes. Yeah, it was dark. It was dark the first couple of years, but we're in a pretty good spot now. I'm sure we'll get into it where we have a little bit of confidence for once.
Yeah. So we obviously went to Rutgers at different times, but you were there during the Ash era. I was there during the Terry Shea era. Pretty similar in terms of dark days. So for you going through that as a student, it obviously didn't, hamper your love for Rutgers sports and Rutgers football. So what has it been like now as working in sports and seeing Rutgers football and Rutgers basketball also kind of rise to a much higher level. And now obviously going into this year where expectations are through the roof for both programs.
Yeah, I always recall like working at some of the darker sporting events. The Michigan 78-0 game comes to mind, being on the sideline for that game until, the clock hit 0 when there's nobody in the stadium. But I do always, I talk to my parents after a lot of these games, and they'd be like, like neither of them went to a traditional 4-year college for 4 years. So I didn't have like a college team growing up. So we all really embraced Rutgers as a family once I got there. And they would always say like, you got to get through the dark to get to the light or whatever. And I knew, like, with my luck, as soon as I left Rutgers, they would start to turn it around and become like, go back to the ways of the 2006, 2007 era teams. And that's like, seems like it could be on the precipice, or at least like heading in the right direction. So like, that was something I always said was like, as soon as I leave the school, they're going to turn it around. And basketball started to do that. The Madison Square Garden Big Ten tournament was like, I remember vividly being like, all right, here we go. Like, we're going to have a basketball team. And then when, Ron and Caleb and Montez Mathis came in the next year, I watched like their first game and they're throwing alley-oops to each other. And I'm like, here it is. Like, we're going to have a basketball team. So it's been awesome to be part of, the fandom through this sort of uprising. And this year, I never thought like Rutgers basketball would get to the level of hype where people are talking about like, is it a disappointing season if they only make the Sweet 16? I'm like, can we like get through the Vegas tournament first, or can we get the season underway and make sure like the players actually touch the court? Because you never know with, the transfer portal and whatnot, what could happen. But it's very, very exciting. People, I work on a college basketball heavy podcast, the Mark Titus Show. And it's like having Rutgers be at the top of the news cycle or at the top of the hype for, teams to look out for this year. It's definitely different, and it's a different like amount of pressure to deal with, but it's been awesome. I can't tell you enough how cool it is to see the team go from where it was when I was a student, both teams, football and basketball, and really the athletics program as a whole to where it is now.
Yeah, I definitely thought that you must be super amped. And you are a senior producer for Barstool Yak as well, mostly sports, with Brandon Walker and Mark Titus and the Mark Titus Show for college hoop heads, one of the best follows and, podcasts out there. And I know he's always done a good job of kind of, easing your pain a little bit with Rutgers. And even though, he did publicly call me a liar on that show when I came out with that report that you so nicely put out there, that the NCAA selection committee was considering that Ohio State lost 2 years ago. If you ever can work it in, just let him know that Pat Hobbs did confirm on the Night Report podcast that it was in fact true, and I did not make it up. But that's a whole nother story. But just in terms, just in terms of being a huge part of that show, I can imagine that you have a lot of things planned, but also high hopes for the program, but also to be able to feature and be able to talk about it. It gives you an opportunity too, to be able to talk about something that you're so passionate about in such a high volume platform.
Yeah, I would love to get the show or get people from Barstool to the rack this year, ideally, because I mean, those tickets are not going to be easy to come by, I would imagine, especially for like some of the bigger games, some of the bigger conference games or the Seton Hall game. But the rack is going to be even more of a Thunderdome than I think it ever has been this year. And I brought a couple guys a few years ago for the Wisconsin game. I brought Marty Mush, Jake Marsh, and Rico Bosco to the game. A game that I think we lost by like 2 points at on the last possession. But like every time I bring somebody to the rack, they're just like their jaws kind of drop with how much of a like heavy environment it is. I think it's one of the most underrated environments in all of college basketball. So I would love to get Mark out there for a game this year, especially with the environment that every single game is going to be this year. Away games too. I mean, I think they just talked about it today that like every road environment is going to be, chaos, especially when they go to like Indiana with the Harper's history at that arena.
Yeah, Dylan Harper said on the Fan on Tuesday about how every road environment is going to be pretty wild, and I love how he's embracing expectations. And just in terms of, I was lucky to go to practice. I saw him and Ace, and they're just kind of like part of the team. You would never think that they don't act like these top recruits. It really does seem like there's good chemistry there. But I have to ask you, in my opinion, probably the best viral and the best Rutgers fan video out there was when Rutgers beat Purdue when they were number one, Ron Harper, the buzzer beater, and you filmed yourself in the student section and then your reaction and you running on the court. It went viral. I'll have to link it in the description of this episode. But what was that whole experience like? Not only being there live for it, but then kind of the aftermath of you having, creating something that was out there for so many people to kind of experience on their own.
Yeah, so I was working in New York City at the time. I'm in Chicago now. That was a game where I was at the office late that day, and I didn't know when I woke up that morning if I was going to go or not. Just because I was living in Jersey City, so getting down to New Brunswick and coming back in time for tip off was like not the easiest thing in the world. I went home that day and was on the train as the game started, and I got home and we were up 12 early, something like that. We were up double digits early. And I was like, all right, I'm not going to be able to live with myself if I miss the end of this game and this happens. So I got in my car and I drove to New Brunswick, and I got to the game with 12 minutes left in the second half. And I got in the student section. Yeah. And at that time we hadn't scored in 5 minutes. And I was like, oh, I just got here and jinxed it. As soon as I got here, we stopped scoring. We went down 6 or 8, but then obviously they come back, they win on a buzzer beater. And that's just I think Barstool has just bred that into my head that if there's an opportunity for something to happen, whip your phone out, because you got to make sure you capture the moment. And yeah, that was just a perfect storm, that video, no pun intended. We got on the court. That's a moment that I'm so happy that I have on camera from my perspective, because I don't think I'll have a sports moment in person that tops something like that. Beating the number one team in the country on a buzzer beater. That's as good as it gets as far as sport, especially when I'm so passionate about Rutgers. I don't think they're a walk-off home run to win the World Series or something. Beating the number one team on a buzzer beater at home and then storming the court is about as good as it gets. And then getting that video out and just watching it, as you said, go viral, that was a very surreal moment. I was sitting in my car, just looking at my phone afterwards. This is crazy. The whole thing is crazy. The fact that this even happened is nuts. I sat in the rack parking lot for an hour and a half after the game and just let the traffic leave and just watched my phone and called people and was like, this is insane. This doesn't feel real. This is not supposed to happen to Rutgers. This does not generally happen to us. So it was awesome.
Yeah, I think obviously the moment was huge, but also it just captured your pure passion and also just what the atmosphere was like, and just the way the entire rack exploded after he made that shot. It was you got guerrilla footage. You were in the mix, and it was really unique, and one of the greatest parts about social media and obviously, kind of what you do at Barstool. So that was awesome. Wanted to ask also, a couple of years ago, you were a big part of the Barstool college football pregame show, going to Rutgers, that Friday night game against Nebraska. Obviously, that was a heartbreaker, but it was a really cool experience for fans. Just talk about how that process and how cool that was for you to bring one of, kind of Barstool's featured shows to your alma mater.
Yeah, so obviously that show kind of is our spin on a game day or a Big Ten kickoff show, where it's a pre-show on a stage with a big audience and a bunch of activations, and something that they've kind of wanted to do in the past with the planning of that show is visiting schools that they haven't gone to before. So obviously they're going to go to the Michigans and the Ohio States of the world, but giving schools a chance basically to show off what they have in big spots. They've been to MAC schools. They've been to, they try and mix it up where it's not just the biggest matchup every week. And also, again, at the time we were mostly located in New York City, so it was an easy proximity thing. And Rutgers, Nebraska was a big game that week on a Friday night. But yeah, I can't thank the people at Rutgers enough for rolling out the red carpet and giving them, the spot that the stage was set up was going to be reserved for an eventual college game day appearance if it ever came. So they were right by the stadium, right by the Scarlet Walk. We had Eric LeGrand come on the stage and be the featured, celebrity guest for the episode. I was in the crowd with my dad doing whiskey shots and giving out picks. It was awesome. I can't thank the people that helped set that up enough, because they really rolled out the red carpet and made sure that, on a big stage, that Rutgers looked good. And that's, obviously very important to the program as a whole, to look good on a big stage like that. And the talent, Brandon Walker, Casey Smith, Dave Portnoy, and Big Cat, they all had very, very, very positive things to say about their time at Rutgers. I think, like most people, they had like a negative connotation in their mind before they got there, and then they realized, like, oh, there is a campus here, and it's like there's an environment here, and we got to go on the field, on the sidelines before the game. That was an awesome night until the second half started. That, like, everything went perfect until halftime of that game. So
Yeah, but it was certainly a cool experience, and transition with Rutgers. Kicking off the season, went over Howard. Huge expectations this year. A lot of fans hope that maybe College Game Day will come to Piscataway this year. Talking about that setup that you have, but what are your kind of thoughts or hopes for this team? Year 5 for Greg Schiano, and just with so many returning starters back, what are your expectations or hopes for this team?
Yeah, I think that, it's like fun to look at a Rutgers football team and think that like a bowl is now like the floor instead of the ceiling in ways. Like I think depending on how how the schedule breaks, I feel like if we were to not make a bowl, that would be very disappointing with this team, especially after how they went to one last year. And then like the ESPN FPI metrics, I saw a graphic that dropped of that this week, and it's like they're favored in 9 of the games based off of that metric, whatever that means. I'm very excited for this year. I think that like that Virginia Tech game is a huge, turning, or a huge show me spot, where it's like both teams are very similar in their placement nationally, where it's like Virginia Tech could be really good. They could be a sneaky, playoff contender. Rutgers maybe not on that level, but Rutgers could be very good and break like the easiest schedule possible in the Big Ten this year. I think like if you're going to hit a window of opportunity, it has to be this year. And the Torre injury is like a big blow to the defense, but they return so many starters that they have to go now. So if they're going to make a bump up in the Big Ten and start that progression towards the top that Schiano's always talking about, like this is the season to do it. And I think that opportunity starts with that Virginia Tech game. We're going to see what type of team this actually is, and I can't express how excited I'm already looking at flights later in the year to try and come back maybe for UCLA to try and get back for a game.
Yeah, that homecoming game will be big. I do think that 4-game stretch starting with Virginia Tech, like you mentioned, then Washington at home, at Nebraska, and Wisconsin, that really is kind of your ceiling defining stretch, where if they can go 3-1, I mean, everything is going to be on the table for them. So obviously Cali McManus at quarterback is going to be interesting. But I wanted to ask you, I'm sure you bragged about Kyle Monungai in the office quite a bit. Just in terms of, he's a great example of a player that no one was expecting to do what he did last year. I guess, what are your thoughts just in terms of what he did? And is there anyone on the team maybe you're thinking that could kind of have a similar kind of breakout going into this year?
Yeah, I think that Monungai is one of the most underrated players in the country. I know that I think Jake Butt ranked him like 9th in the Big Ten and said he's the most underrated player in the Big Ten. Like the guy led the Big Ten in rushing last year, and nobody seems to want to acknowledge that. Obviously, we were in a very run heavy offense last year, and this year it's going to be hopefully a little bit different, where we maybe call a couple passes over 10 yards every game. That wasn't really in the cards last year. But I think that Kyle is going to be the focus of the offense, but I would love to see the receiving core get a little more play, a little more deep ball action this year. I don't know how much of that is going to come with Ethan, but my guy Christian Dremel is back out there. I would love to see him kind of take a step up and become one of the feature receivers in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I think he could have a big year because you have guys like Demir Miller and hopefully Ian Strong that could be more deep threats. So I feel like that could really open things up for Dremel in the slot. And just in terms of talking about hoops a little bit, obviously you mentioned Vegas before. Rutgers has a huge opportunity early on. Houston, Alabama, they're going to be ranked probably both in the top 5. Any thoughts just in terms of, I guess, even since you've left Rutgers, like the transfer portal and NIL, how much things have changed? And I know that you talk about all that on your shows as well. But just in terms of like Cliff now being at Alabama, how different has it changed even for you as a fan? In your 20s, just in terms of guys, being like guys like you mentioned, Caleb, Ron, having their whole careers at Rutgers, and now that's really a thing of the past already.
Yeah, it's definitely it feels like a completely different game, especially in basketball. Since I was a student, I was watching like Corey Sanders put up 40 shots a game, and now that they have a really dynamic team. But yeah, only having 3 guys return from last year, like it's a completely different basketball team than last year, and I do have like not concerns, but I wonder how fast or how long it'll take them to gel as a unit, especially going up against like premier level talent so early in the season. But if they want to be like a legit ranked, contender, that's what you do. You have to play good teams early in the season, and that's not something that they've traditionally done over the last few years. So getting an opportunity to prove what they're worth that early in the year against like really, really, really awesome teams. Alabama's going to be like super, super, super good. Nobody's doubting that. It'll be very interesting to see what they look like that early in the year. When playing against Cliff on the other side is going to be weird, I think. But
Yeah.
I couldn't be more excited. Like I think that they're going to be sick, and we do some activations for the Final Four every year, so I'll be in San Antonio regardless. But hopefully, I'll be in San Antonio decked out in Scarlet and Block R's.
Well, if things align the way Rutgers fans hope they do, the Sweet 16 is at the Prudential Center in Newark for the East Region, which would be just an epic experience as a Rutgers fan if they can be there. Obviously, we can't, however they're in the Sweet 16, it doesn't matter where they play. But that would be.
Let's get there.
I wanted to ask you about just like obviously being a Rutgers fan. We've all been through it. It's interesting because like football, all of a sudden the national media is kind of piled on in a positive way, been on the bandwagon, talking about them being a trendy sleeper. Where hoops, I was kind of worried of that happening. And I feel like they're a little bit under the radar just in terms of people jumping on to the fact that there's so many freshmen, so many new players. I guess as a fan, how do you approach both in terms of Rutgers football kind of getting a lot of buzz and hoops maybe kind of, probably not going to be ranked going into the year? Does that play into, a good or a bad thing for either, in your opinion?
So my feelings on it is always like Rutgers overperforms until they're expected to perform. It always, to me, it's always felt like they play up to their competition. And then as soon as it's like, oh, Rutgers is actually pretty good, then that's when like the drop off happens or like the sneaky loss happens. So if people want to keep doubting us or underrating us or calling us sneaky or a sleeper or something, that's totally fine with me. I don't need to have Rutgers put on a national pedestal. I'm fully fine with being underestimated because it's easier to like overachieve than underdeliver if they're being like, oh, Rutgers should be in the Final Four and then we don't, and it's like, okay, was that a failure of a season? I'd much rather be underappreciated and underlooked at and have the opportunity to overdeliver and be the sneaky underdog team. I think that's where Rutgers fits into the echelon of college sports as a better fit than a perennial favorite.
Yeah, you basically just proved my longtime point where it doesn't matter how many years you've been a Rutgers fan, you just capture the essence of what I'd say the majority feeling is as a Rutgers fan is you never want too much attention, and it's always better to be discounted. Yes. So I'm kind of happy with hoops. I'm a little worried with football, just in terms of how they get trendy, but maybe now the injury concerns have leveled that off a little bit in a positive way, and this team can fly under the radar a little bit, maybe in the beginning until they start winning big games. Anything else in terms of your Rutgers experience? What about favorite place to go, favorite place to eat, or favorite kind of like Rutgers experience aside from anything sports related?
I was my bar of choice was Scarlet Pub and Nightclub, and that was because selfishly Scarlet Pub, Najee, who runs Scarlet Pub, was very kind to me as the Barstool Rutgers representative. I'll put it that way. So I was a big Scarlet Pub guy, and then it was always Daniel's Pizza after the bars. Big Daniel's Pizza guy. Fat sandwiches here and there, but Daniel's Pizza was me and my friend's spot. Yeah, I can't. I have a lot of like family friends in New Jersey that, you know, maybe have like younger siblings or something that are considering Rutgers, and they'll have like their parents will set up time with me to talk to them about my experience. And I can't say enough good things about it. I know like your audience maybe doesn't need to hear it because it's a Rutgers captive audience, but it was the best place in the world for me for 3 years. I met some amazing people there, and I credit all of my, you know, quote unquote success post-graduation to the time I spent there and the things that I learned there, and some of the teachers and the professors, Steve Miller in the communication department, like some of the best people that I've gotten a chance to do, you know, this with. And I can't say enough good things about Rutgers.
Yeah, Steve Miller, no doubt, is a Rutgers legend.
Yeah.
Many students going through his classes through the years, and you know, someone that's obviously a kind of a older, more grizzled fan. My beard selling me out there. You're a great ambassador for Rutgers, and it's just awesome to see you out there and thriving. And you know, I think you're very inspiring just because of how you've grinded your way through your career so early on, and moved your way up at Barstool. But also wanted to ask you, you just passed your year in terms of your weight loss journey. You've been very public with it. And it's been very inspiring to a lot of people. Just posted that you're down 120 pounds from the last year, just in terms of what that whole experience has been like, but also kind of how it's galvanized people and inspired people around you to try it on their own, and just how it's changed your life.
Yeah, so I moved to Chicago last August. We're coming up on a year this week, actually. And basically, I've been a bigger guy my entire life, and tried a bunch of, you know, diets and different things to try and lose weight, and nothing's ever really stuck. And I was moving out of my apartment in Jersey City, and weighed myself, and I was 300 pounds. And I was like, okay, enough is enough. Like at some point I have to make this a permanent change before there's, you know, like not enough time to make a permanent change, for lack of a better explanation. So when I moved to Chicago, I said, this is a huge life change, a huge lifestyle change. I'm living on my own for the first time. I'm, you know, 1,000 miles away from my family for the first time. What better time than now to throw a second major life change on top of this, and just, you know, try and bundle them together and start dieting. And I started dieting and saw some success. And there's a gym in my building, and said, you know, like, I'm sitting on top of a gym. I'm just sitting here. Let's start going to the gym and see what happens. And, you know, I was able to find some success quickly. And I started posting, you know, pictures and tweets in a thread on my Twitter. And the main reason I did that was to hold myself accountable, because if I'm posting day 1, day 2, day 3, and then I miss a day, like now it's public and people can say, oh, you missed a day. Like you're not holding, you know, yourself to your own standard. And that sort of became, you know, a thing larger than myself, no pun intended, where as I was losing the weight, people, you know, were reaching out with their own stories and saying like, you lost 20 pounds. I'm going to get on the treadmill today because I need to lose 20 pounds. You lost, 40 pounds. I need to lose this one. And, you know, as the end of last year and the beginning of this year went on, hundreds, if not, 1,000 plus people have reached out to me publicly, privately, in real life, over social media, to express them starting their own journeys, or, how my journey has affected their life. And, it was originally just to hold myself accountable, but now, it's become a bigger thing where I'm holding other people accountable, where they're saying like, oh, TJ's still working at this. I need to work at this and work at myself. And that's not something I ever really intended for that to be, but it's, now that's part of the journey. And I've been, more focusing on maintaining my weight and getting in better shape over the last few months. But I'm down 120 pounds over the last year. So down from 300 to 180, which unfortunately means a lot of my Rutgers clothes don't fit anymore. But that's kind of the price you pay to get in better shape. But yeah, it's been an awesome journey, and it's been really cool to be able to talk to people. And I don't see myself as any sort of an inspiration or anything, but if that's how other people look at it, that's awesome for me. And I'll definitely, I'm always trying to interact with people and answer questions if people have questions about how, my journey went and how to help other people on theirs.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal story, and I've had my own health journey the last year and a half, and just seeing you go through what you're going through has definitely helped me also. What's your biggest piece of advice for someone that wants to make a serious health change like you have?
I think for me, it was that momentum is hard to get but easy to maintain. So once, like, starting a program or making a life change, whatever the life change is, whether if it's you want to, if you want to pick up a new hobby or something, it's hard to start, and get that rock rolling. It's hard to get the ball moving on something. The first day going to the gym is hard. It's awkward, especially if, like me, you haven't been to the gym much in your previous life. But like, once you go once, it's like easier to go a second day. And once you go 2 days, it's easier to go for a week. And once you go for a week, it's easy to go for a month. Once that ball starts rolling and the momentum starts, it's a lot easier to maintain and to stay in that progress than it is to get started. So like, my biggest piece of advice to people is, like, figure out what you want to do and just start doing it. Because, like, it's easy for people to say, like, oh, I'm going to start my diet on January 1st, or I'm going to start my diet on Monday. It's hard to be like, let's start the diet right now, today, and like get it rolling and get after it, because it's easier to look at stuff in the future than it is to like get started right now. So my advice is always just like, start. Like, starting is the hardest part. Maintaining it is there are ups and downs on that journey, but getting the ball started is the hardest part.
Yeah, that's great advice. And me personally, just the consistency is so important. But it's like, I think people don't realize like how much better you feel, and there's almost like a high from that you don't want to let go of. And I found, like, even when I have a cheat meal or something, it's almost like I make myself feel guilty, and I don't feel as good. And I want that high of being healthy and feeling healthy during that, as you go through it.
Definitely. Yeah, my social battery is way up from where it was a year ago, and everything you're saying there is right. Like, I feel like this is, at this point, it's a permanent life change, and it's maybe better in every aspect of my life. So I can't express enough how good it's been.
And it's awesome that you did it at the stage in your life that you are younger. So it's, to have these changes now is awesome. And, just wanted to say it's been awesome to talk to you. I've been wanting to do it for a long time. It's been great to trade messages with you for so many years. And obviously going into this year with Rutgers, to end it, just any predictions you want to give, or just any kind of hopes, or what your, any message to Rutgers fans as we all go through what we hope is a very special year for many reasons.
Yeah. Give me 9 wins in football. 9 wins would be, and then we'll throw a parade down College Ave. And basketball, I'm just going to strap in and hold on for dear life, I think, because that thing could be a rocket ship to the moon, or I don't want to think about the other options, but I think I'm just going to strap in and hope for the best with basketball. That's going to be a fun ride.
And last thing, just promote all the shows you work on and how people can find you on social media.
Yeah, so the shows I work on are the Barstool Yak, which is a daily live show at 12 Central, 1 Eastern on YouTube and Rumble. Mostly sports, which is more of a sports slanted live show, Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern. And then the Mark Titus show comes out. It'll be twice a week starting in October. That's more of your college basketball flavor, and that's on podcast platforms and video platforms as well. And then you can find me on Twitter at TJ Hitchings.
TJ, thank you so much for your time, and really appreciate it all. And looking forward to going through a great year for Rutgers Athletics, and obviously following your work and all your inspiring work on social media as well with your journey. Thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Of course. Hopefully I'll see you around Piscataway sometime.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for listening and watching once again here at the Scarlet Faithful podcast.